Hey, I'm golf broadcaster Matt Adams. The updated and expanded second edition of my book, The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments, is now available. Readers can expect to march with Arnie's Army at the 1960 U.S. Open, relive Jack Nicklaus's remarkable 1986 Masters win, and be amazed by the Tiger Slam. The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, Golf's Biggest Stars Recall Their Finest Moments. Pick it up where fine books are sold, including BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Today, we're going to have the final part 4, of the 1975 NFL Divisional Playoff between the Minnesota Vikings and the Dallas Cowboys. And if you listen to the first 3 parts, you will know that my guest, Dave Depaola, was supposed to be on this podcast with me, but we had major technical difficulties. So I will be adding Dave's comments into the podcast. Not quite as good as having Dave's actual voice, but we'll have to make do with what we have. So, when we left off last week, the Vikings were punting, and Dallas took possession at their 15-yard line with only 1 minute and 51 seconds left in the game. A pass to Drew Pearson, his first reception of the day, gained 9 yards. On the next play, Bobby Bryant batted away a pass to Golden Richards. Drew Pearson caught a pass on 3rd and 1 that gained 6 yards. Then they lost 6 yards on the next play due to another bad snap. Okay, this is Dave speaking now. After that bad snap, they took John Fitzgerald out at center and put rookie Kyle Davis in the game. This is Mark speaking. Yeah, John Fitzgerald had an elbow injury, and that's why he was having trouble with the snaps. Davis was the long snapper on special teams and messed up his knee the following season. Unfortunately, his career was pretty much over after that. After an incompletion, the Cowboys faced a 4th and 17 from their 25-yard line. Viking fans sensed victory and began to celebrate. This is Dave speaking now. It looked pretty grim for the Cowboys, Mark. After that incompletion, they started rolling the closing credits. I was watching the game at home, and my Uncle Jerry would always come over to watch the games with us. I was standing behind my uncle, about to walk out and throw the football around in the yard with my buddy Frank Davino. Comebacks and last-minute heroics are common in today's game, but they didn't happen too often back then. This is Mark speaking. No, they didn't. And I didn't have much hope either, Dave. I watched the game at home with my family, and we all felt dejected, thinking there was no chance. But we all started cheering when Staubach connected with Drew Pearson on a sideline route. The 25-yard pass was thrown a little high, and as Pearson jumped up to catch the ball, Nate Wright pushed him out of bounds. Vikings players and fans argued that Pearson caught the ball out of bounds. Now this is Dave speaking. I was headed outside, but I sat back down after Pearson caught that sideline pass for the first down. The head linesman, Jerry Bergman, ruled that Pearson would have landed in bounds without being pushed. In 1975, the rule clearly stated that the official could rule it a completion in case of a force out, before being able to get 2 feet down in bounds. Coach Bud Grant disagreed with the rule, but that rule stood until 2008. This is Mark speaking. After an incompletion on first down, Staubach dropped back and let it fly. The ball was slightly underthrown, but Drew Pearson reached back for it with one hand and cradled it against his hip. Touchdown. The point after was good, and the Cowboys led 17-14. To add insult to injury, the Vikings were penalized 15 yards for unsportsmanlike conduct. The penalty may have not seemed like a big deal, but it was. Like Vikings kicker Fred Cox, Cowboys kicker Tony Fritsch was not known for kicking the ball deep. The penalty allowed Fritsch to kick off from the 50-yard line instead of the 35-yard line. The 15-yard difference enabled Fritsch to kick the ball into the end zone, and the Vikings could only return it to the 12-yard line. The Vikings only needed a field goal to send the game into overtime, but with only 18 seconds remaining and poor field position, which was a direct result of that unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, the Vikings' chances looked slim. Tarkenton dropped back to pass and was sacked by Ed Depaola Jones at the 1-yard line. This is Dave speaking. When Tarkenton got up, he started yelling at the referee. The announcers commented on it, but I'm still curious what he was complaining about. I imagine he was just mad about the whole situation. This is Mark speaking. The only other thing I could think of, Dave, is that Jones might have gotten a piece of Tarkenton's face mask, or that he was arguing about the unsportsmanlike penalty from the previous play. Then an unruly fan threw a whiskey bottle onto the field, hitting a referee in the head. The game was delayed while the medical team tended to the injured official, who required numerous stitches. Dave speaking. Yeah, they were throwing all kinds of debris on the field. The field judge was knocked out cold, and when he regained consciousness, they bandaged him up and let him off the field. He looked like one of those soldiers from the Civil War. His name was Armin Terzian, and there's a famous clip from NFL films showing Coach Marv Levy yelling at him and calling him an over-officious jerk. That was years later. Yeah, I remember watching that clip, Dave. This is Dave speaking again. Here's another interesting piece of information about that bottle throwing incident. While the field judge was getting tended to, a security guard approached to lend a hand. That security guard is the guy who kicked Drew Pearson when he caught that fourth down sideline pass. Many years later, the security guard, Dick Jankowski, invited Drew Pearson to his house in Minnesota. You can find the video of this visit on YouTube. Drew Pearson and Dick Jankowski's unique connection from NFL films. Picture on footballzebras.com shows Jankowski walking out onto the field. In the background, you can see where they set up scaffolding for the cameraman to stand on. It looks very primitive and crude by today's standards. You would never see something like that today, but it was considered acceptable in the 1970s. And while they were tending to the field judge, Alan Page headed to the dressing room. Page was so disgusted that he just wanted to get out of there. This is Mark speaking. He might not have felt safe with all the stuff the fans were throwing on the field. Meanwhile, Tarkenton was still giving the referee an earful. Tarkenton's day got a lot worse when he later received news that his father had died during the game. A short pass to Foreman brought the ball out to the 14-yard line. Tarkenton dropped back to pass and was sacked by Ed Jones and Harvey Martin. For the Vikings, the season was over. The Cowboys moved on to the NFC Championship against the heavily favored Rams in LA. Dallas won that game 37-7 before losing a close game to the Steelers 21-17 in the Super Bowl. Was there a push-off? 49 years later, people still debate whether Drew Pearson pushed Nate Wright on the famous Hail Mary pass. Most Viking fans say yes, while most Cowboy fans say no. I remember seeing something orange fly past where the play took place, and at first I thought the object, which turned out to be an orange, was a penalty flag. This is Dave speaking. Yeah, we all thought that orange was a penalty flag at first. There isn't a perfect angle where you can see a definite push-off. That field was very muddy, and it looks like Nate Wright may have slipped or lost his balance as he reached back for the ball, but it's hard to tell. Pearson caught the ball between his elbow and his hip. This is Mark speaking. There weren't any reviews back then, and they didn't have 100 different camera angles. I can't tell if he pushed off. Maybe he did, and maybe he didn't. But I'll say this much as a Cowboys fan. If Pearson did push off, the referees either didn't see it or ignored it, just like they ignored the interference against Cliff Harris in the second quarter. Both of those controversial non-calls led to touchdowns. Dave speaking. That's right. About 8 years ago, I flew down to Texas with a buddy of mine for a short vacation. We went to the game in their new facility, which they named the Star. They have a building there in Frisco, Texas, that's like a Cowboys museum. And when you walk up the staircase, they have a large frame-by-frame photos of the Hail Mary throw and catch. It's a tremendous display. Mark speaking. Sounds great. A look at the stats from the game show that Dallas outplayed Minnesota in every aspect of the game. The Cowboys had 19 first downs, while the Vikings had only 12. The Cowboys' defense held Fran Tarkenton to just 12 completions for 135 yards, and Chuck Foreman to only 56 yards rushing on 18 carries and 42 yards receiving. Dave speaking. That's right. People talk about this game, and all they want to talk about is the Hail Mary pass. But the Cowboys' defense won this game. They held Minnesota to 215 total yards and did it on the road. Mark speaking. The Doomsday defense was excellent. I wanted to point out that cornerback Mark Washington played a great game. He completely shut down receiver John Gilliam, who had one reception for 15 yards. Dave speaking. Gilliam was their primary receiver. I had a teacher in junior high school, Bernard Gilliam, who was also our baseball and basketball coach. He was John Gilliam's cousin. What are the odds of that? Mark speaking. Pretty slim. Offensively, Roger Staubach had 17 completions for 246 yards despite getting sacked 5 times. Dave speaking. Staubach had a solid game. He never lost control of the ship, and the game never got away from him. Mark speaking. That's a good way to put it, Dave. The Vikings defense did an excellent job of stopping the Cowboys' top receiver, Drew Pearson, until the fourth quarter, when he caught 4 passes for 91 yards. Dave speaking. And he caught all 4 of those passes on the final drive, Mark. You want to talk about a guy who was clutch. Mark speaking. That's true. The Vikings also had difficulty stopping Preston Pearson, who caught 5 passes for 77 yards. It's interesting to note that despite the vicious hitting in this game, there were no serious injuries. Dave speaking. It was a very hard-hitting game, and people who weren't around back then don't understand that there is so much more to this game than that Hail Mary pass. Let's not forget to thank Dave Volsky for putting this game on YouTube. He's the guy who re-enhances all those old games from the 1970s and does a fantastic job. It even has the pregame show with Phyllis George, Brent Musburger, Irv Cross, and Jimmy the Greek. And how about Metropolitan Stadium? That was a great stadium. The cheerleaders were all bundled up and people were ice skating where a rink was set up just outside the stadium. The other unique thing about that stadium was that both teams stood on the same sideline. The only other stadium like that was County Stadium in Milwaukee, where the Packers played sometimes. Mark speaking. That's right, both stadiums were built for baseball and they could barely fit a football field in them. Well, I think that about wraps it up, Dave. Thanks for having me on, Mark. It was a great game and it was a lot of fun reliving it. God bless. Okay, God bless, Dave. Talk to you soon. Okay, that's going to wrap it up for the 1975 Divisional Playoff game between the Cowboys and Vikings. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. Take care, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, aka the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.